anything to share that they've been doing. I've just noticed that Ruben's on the call, and I would imagine, knowing Ruben, that you've been doing some stuff in this area. I can't believe that you're not, Ruben.
Hello, how are you, George?
Yeah, good.
I suppose I am the only Ruben here, right?
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about? Sorry, data
I just
engineering.
wondered, have you been using AI?
Yes, I try to implement it in my work. There's frustrations in the process, obviously, but at the end I make it work for myself.
Good.
Yeah, I'm working with data mostly. Yeah. Databases, like copy, for example. Show me a copy from many projects and get conclusions and predict missing data from, models. So basically, I'm trying to fill data that is missing based on previous experiences and things like that.
Oh,
So
that's exactly what
machine learning processes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pain. It's not something easy, and it's difficult to control the quality of the outputs. Basically, I need to review everything. I don't know how to explain, but yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of coding, basically, talking with computers.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, Ruben, maybe not this week, but we're running these sessions every couple of weeks. So if you're up for it, if you could show us what you've been doing. I mean, maybe you show Tim and I what you've been doing, because Tim will show you what we've been doing. And the whole point about this exercise is for us to bring people together and share knowledge, which I know you're up for anyway, Ruben. Right, Victor. Sorry, Matt Cunliffe.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of something I'd love to find a solution for. I've seen some bits out in the past. So in the previous life at an innovation event at Northumberland Water, we did this kind of workshop. So it was this piece of, again, looking at the kind of asset validation side to a certain extent. So obviously water industry, they've got so many, like 6 million whatever assets. And the thing they don't know is if that thing they have in a drawing from the 60s is still there. So we kind of came up with this kind of sort of program of potential product type thing, where if you could throw in all the documents you have and all the data you have from maybe Cafe etc., about whether things have been attended, whether somebody's been to site recently on that, whether a new commissioning certificate's happened on something or whatever, then you could sort of have all your assets there and then sort of red, amber, green, whether or not you think that's still valid because you've got some recent information on it. Amber, because maybe it hasn't been looked at for the last couple of years. And red, hang on, nobody's even put any information into the system for the last 10 years on this. So somebody needs to go check whether or not that still exists. So it'd be really cool to know whether anybody's got a kind of way we can maybe look at that.
Excellent. So what we've got there is a good example of somebody knowing what they want. They've got a fair bit of knowledge about how to do it, but we could do something collaborative around that. Victoria.
Hi, everyone. I don't know how relative immediately, but in the near future, my project, which I'm working currently on, will be relevant. I will just show you one slide, which kind of try to explain. You will understand this slide. When I show it outside the industry, it's a little bit more complicated. But if in the future you want to hear the details, very happy to present. But in a nutshell here. So what I'm looking at citizens' participation within the smart city, smart building, and all this smartness. And so at the moment, I'm in feasibility and research stage. And what I'm finding with my colleagues is that feedback loop is broken at an infrastructure level. So there is no such thing as infrastructure for citizens' participation. There is things which are facilitating it, but they not necessarily resolve an openness of data. And we're talking about smart buildings, smart cities, smart this, smart that. All it is really is it needs to be centric around something. And then when I'm looking directly at the citizens, it's because of their proximity layer to the problem and the systems and the part of the systems which is affecting them directly. They understand the problem and their feedback is enormously appreciated, but there is no such infrastructure to collect it. And we can talk about real-time analytics, interrupted connectivity for as long as it takes, but we need to bring the smartness from the citizens into it. And it is a process rather than a software. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Sorry. Phone went off, so let's just switched it off. Anybody? Tim, you wanted to contribute.
Yeah, just going back to Matt's thing is that this is one of the things that we're looking at the moment and playing with AI on the folder structure of what you've got in the documents and things like that, rather than having to throw it into somebody's vector database system. I've just been playing around with organizing one of my folders. So on my house, I've got loads of folders of bits of information, of invoices and quotations, like we've had bathrooms done over the year, new bathrooms and or bought things. And one of the things that we've looked at, we're now looking at in terms of use cases is, which I think I had a conversation this morning with George about, which was at the moment we all know that we're just getting bad data coming from the pipeline, but how do we fix it back at the root? How do you fix it at the coalface? What is a good process for people to actually do this? Because they clearly have got issues, and what are the tools that we can experiment with to actually come up with the ideas of these are the parts in the workflow that you actually need. And the other one was on mentioned about Kobe, which is obviously very close to George and I's hearts. I've in one of our projects, I've got Kobe data, so we've got an MPC server that I can use, but I've also connected it to my Home Assistant, which is running on Raspberry Pi, and then combine the two. The AIs combine the two things together, and it's just like amazing. Anyway, we'll probably mention these things later, but again, use case scenarios is that it's what you want, and then you actually have to respond to things. So it's like just in time responses. So we need to look at both of those things. Is that we may not know what we're going to be asked, but for the majority of it, the standard stuff people say, have you got this information? Have you got that information? And it should be just easy to reply to people. And about how much time do people spend looking for information? Because those are obviously that's the low-hanging fruit we should be going for.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think, George, for everybody's sake, the one part that I'm really concerned on, I'll start at the very beginning of the project. So if you were using Revit, you get 4 different sources of data. I use Autodesk, I go to NBS, I get manufacturer, and I get in-house development. One of the big problems amongst all of those, and comes back to Kobe, comes back to the IFC, all the different classifications, is that we've got that myriad. And this is where AI starts making a lot of sense, is joining the object to the data and then getting a consistent standard. The difficulty is when you work on a big project is this range of different correct data. The bigger one that I come to, and Tim, this is about the things that you're experiencing and what Matt's looking at, is we've got all these separate sources of data. As long as they are tagged as to the date that they were taken, the citizen, as Victoria said, the person who's responsible for it, and the venue that it's in, suddenly you've grouped these things into parcels that you can compare Now, exactly how that happens, that's a little bit more complex. But the idea of the photogrammetry, the idea of being able to go and do those cross-checks, basically creating a funnel and filtering out what are critical pieces. I think that's really important, because that then means that from a very short order, you can now start getting a list of things that you need to look at, and then validate them from priority, because some of these things you're never going to be able to manage and monitor all of them. So I think it really needs something where the steps of the AI need to be in a way shared, and have a look at how we can identify the stuff like Matthew was talking about. It really is important, because I remember something about the AI identifying particular valves by virtue of the shape of the valve, which would then be connected up to the external databases in the web and find which product it was in that particular case. So again, I'd like to see a little bit more of how can we parcel things together, and that's where room spaces become really important. And they tie back to Kobe, Tim, for what you're working on. And it all starts getting a bit of order in there. And the AI does that engine room grunt work. I think that's the important part. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good. Okay. Well, I think that's been a good starter for 10, as it were. Right. So what I wanted to do is just introduce, there's a few people that are new to this. I've noticed. So I'm just going to go over a couple of things that we've been working on, and that is to look at things from a point of view of what the golden thread is. And what we're trying to do is make it satisfy risks and reduce risks. That's one of the key areas. And traditionally, the risk has been that size, and therefore you need quite a lot of information to be able to deal with that risk, right? What's now happened with everything else that's going on is the risk is increasing, and the amount of information that we're having to deal with is exponentially more. And also the interrelationship of that information becomes even more complex. So just picking up on what Pierre was saying a moment ago, that's something that we need to be able to ensure that is properly glued together. And what we've been doing is looking at that from a point of view of what is the value proposition that we can actually take to senior people who are controlling budgets to say better information, more reliable information. What is the financial benefit of that? So what we've identified in the white paper, and if you've not got a copy of the white paper that we published last week, I think probably most people have now. But if you don't have a copy of the white paper, just put white paper in the chat, please, and we will send you a copy of it. But the analysis that we've done identifies that the having more or better information and more auditability has got some serious benefits in terms of cost savings, also for life cycle, also for supply chain assurance, the golden thread itself, and for operation and maintenance, and then being able to automate, which is largely what we're trying to do this afternoon. So there's some major benefits from that we'd like to see realized. And one of the things that whatever technologies, whatever systems we're using, we need to recognize that information really needs to be machine readable. And if it's being delivered at the moment in documents, we really need to turn that into machine readable information, which is something that Tim's been working on. And I'm also going to show something that Carl Magnus from CompliMind has given us. He's not here, so I think I'm going to run a video that he's produced for me, which I can share. The important thing, though, is that machine readable information also needs to be caught up in a process where people are collaborating, so that both people that are using the information and also people that are creating the information share some equity in it being right. And also we need to make sure that if we've got information about assets and systems, that we've actually got a context in which those products are being used, because that again will have a big impact on things. And one thing that's common to all of these things, not saying it's the only thing, but a lot of the things revolve around spaces and the assets that are maybe either supporting those spaces or indeed are in them. We've got statutory drivers, we've got operational drivers, and we've also got organizational drivers. And things that are common to all of those are spaces and assets. And then we may have fire safety, energy, which I can imagine is going to become even more important now, and infrastructure. And again, what we need to do is make sure that whatever systems are being used, we've got that type of classification. So the purpose of, in particular, today's event or this working group, it's about bringing together people with expertise who are willing to work together. If, for example, the work that Victoria's doing, or Matt's doing, or Tim's doing, you can each benefit from what others are doing. Obviously, that's got to be done in an equitable way so that people aren't just taking. We need to be getting a value from that. But the first step is to introduce everybody to everybody else, and really just at the moment share what you're doing without giving away your crown jewels, but to be able to say this is possible. And then from that, in a reasonably informal way, we can form relationships and hopefully then have a situation where we've got tested solutions, which then we can also within the group have people that know what they need. So people that are maybe running buildings, or people that are implementing different types of asset management solutions. So what we're then doing is bringing together people that have a need with people that can deliver the solutions. And I think that's a very powerful message that we've got within the task force. So if you are interested in becoming part of this, because we're trying to turn this into an entity which is a commercial entity that we can then offer solutions on. Pierre, you've got something to ask?
George, something I would like to see, and that's what AI is really good at doing, is whatever your particular scenario is on whatever kind of project, as long as you can indicate the project type or the building type, because that has an influence on it. If that's written up, a small synopsis of what the problem is and some of your early investigations of where you are, and this is not taking away the ability to have a chat, but basically to create a big pool of the different conditions, and you'll find how many common themes there are that goes through, that when you start talking, we can identify what those themes are. Somebody's putting in junk data or whatever. So that's how AI, I believe, can actually start opening this can of worms, because otherwise you've got to talk to 25 people before you can actually open the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Pierre. And in fact, what I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we had the last session. But one of the things that we've been identifying through the use of AI, a combination of AI and data engineering, when we've been analysing O&Ms, which are becoming quite is a really useful thing to do, is that we're finding things are missing. Now, when we find out things are missing, I was talking that through with one of the big consultancies, and they said, well, any information that's missing, if it is actually important information, that is a defect because it should have been provided. And it should have either been provided because it was part of the information requirements, or it should have been provided because it's required for building regs. So we took that information, we took that point, and we've been testing it over the last few weeks. And it's absolutely the case that if you've got incomplete information, that is a defect. It's a digital defect. And therefore it's covered under defects liability, or can be. And we've even got insurers now that are agreeing to that as well. So the reason I'm mentioning that is that in that context is what I did with that, Pierre. I took the information that we pulled together, and then I created versions of it for different stakeholders. So I produced a version of that digital defect process for landlords, but then I produced a version of it for tier 1 contractors. I produced one for facilities managers, and it's very easy to do. Obviously, I've just been using Copilot for it, but it was drawing into a knowledge base or a set of information that I gave it, and it's come out with some very good things. So if anybody's interested in seeing what the result of that was, if you just put digital defects in the chat, I will share with you the various different perspectives that we've created. And that's now being taken up by people to really look at ways that information can be gathered. So that's really that part of it. Is anybody interested in that? Put digital defects in the chat. So classification becomes really important, and taxonomy in making all of this viable. So what we're proposing is that we have some really good classification information, which means that you can then have a range of different applications from different parties, but all tied together using the same information. This is the white paper that, as I say, if you've not had a copy of it, then just put white paper in the chat. And one of the things that we're doing at the moment that I do just want to mention is how are we able to make the process more managed. So what we've done is taken the golden thread, identified some of the key activities and what the financial benefit or what the benefits are of that. But the next step is to add tasks. So what we would like to do, if anybody's involved in producing task information delivery plans or whatever, what we'd like you to do is just put tasks in the chat, and we can then have a chat with you offline. We're organising another session dedicated to this. We're doing this with Mo from Malta and Franco, who's on the call at the moment. So if you're interested in getting involved in the tasks and who's responsible, who's accountable, etc., for carrying out those tasks, just put tasks in the chat, and we'll invite you to the meeting in, I think it's in a week or a couple of weeks' time. I'm just now going to wrap up, just to finish that particular theme on standards. So what we're looking at the moment is trying to look at a method of organising property information, both in terms of the property and also facilities management. And these are two of the main publications in the UK. Standardized ways of describing floors and also assets. So if we can manage things in this way, then we're more likely to get stuff that is interoperable, so that we can logically structure stuff by site, building, floor, space, and then asset. The thing that's missing from that is systems, that I think we need to work on. And there's a group called the ADS Alliance, which is trying to draw together the various different standards bodies. One cautionary note on that, though, is that we've spotted that in America, Omniclass, which is managed by Nick, is it CSI or CIS? Nick, are you there? Nick Nisbet? No? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, it's managed by the Construction Specifications Institute, CSI.
Yeah.
They've set up a subsidiary which now owns the copyright of all the classification tables, that's Omniclass, Master Format, and Uniformat, and is it has started to charge anyone who uses any one of the codes in those systems in any of their documents. It's a very aggressive position, and I find it very concerning, because if it happens there, it could happen here. And we need to think about how we make sure that our shared resources, the things that allow us to communicate better, and I think classifications in that category, remain available to all of us to use. I'll also add that anyone who puts the code into a computer system is also covered by and likely to get a demand for payment in the States. So it's a worrying development, and there are aspects of it which may be closer to home. I don't know if George, if you want to say any more.
Yeah, there's some major things that certainly are concerning me at the moment with some of our members. Yeah, so some people are finding that the SFG 20 fees have gone up from £15,000 a year. This is for a big FM, to £200,000 a year. Yeah, just think about that. And it's certainly the case. We're obviously all promoting Uniclass, but that's also owned now by a company that's a venture capital backed business. So it is something that I'm certainly concerned about, and Nick and I have been talking about. I don't know what we can do about it, but as an industry, it's something we need to be very aware of. Does anybody have a comment on that?
Well, I think it's terrible news. I mean, it could kill a lot of good initiatives we are engaging ourselves in.
Yeah.
Because, without a common language, we cannot communicate properly at any level.
Yeah.
It will, if we do not, if we are discouraged from using a common language because it's expensive, so to speak, then we will end up generating more and more misunderstandings, which is terrible news.
Sure. Pierre?
Obviously.
George, yeah, once again, I always thought that standards actually needed to be free, so that they were available to absolutely everyone, and then there could never be a problem with somebody saying, I can't afford the standards. And I fully understand that NBS and everybody else is in a money-making process of delivering those particular standards, etc. But that's something that we actually need to find a way of making it. I've got white van guys outside here that are real cowboys, and I'm watching them not doing anything properly. because they don't have the standards. They don't follow the standards at all. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Victoria.
Yes, and I have a comment on that as well. So, Stephen, do you remember? Oh, sorry, George. Do you remember you say that you don't believe that the blockchain can be a solution for the construction? And here is the use case. So, the blockchain itself can be something which can protect decentralization. So, from what I remember from many years when I just stepped into the BIM environment, 2010, 11, 12. NBS was subsidized by government, and it was millions and millions of pounds was thrown into Uniclass classification. So, and if we now start talking about that, it's going to be ROI put on that exercise. Obviously, we're all going to have a questions, and it's a terrible way of going. However, decentralization through using the blockchain technology is potentially can prevent us from that happening, and I can have a presentation on that if anybody interested.
How can blockchain help with that?
So first of all, and I will probably give an example of Uniclass because it's something I'm personally familiar. I'm not so sure about the Omniclass. Say, for example, and I'm taking an example of this initiative particularly, and the life cycle of Uniclass or investment, I would say, into excellent system. So this initiative is just started. We verbally agree that we're going to participate. We verbally agree that we're going to have the financial model applied to it at some point. But what if the same exactly happens to NBS at the beginning when the government gave the money to NBS for particular reasons, and then what happens later we don't know. Obviously, government wanted to make sure that we're all going digital nicely and organized. So, and now we're not quite sure, and we're not even asked, but we're already in the system. We're using the system, but we're not asked if it's a good idea. Some venture capitalists making the decisions for a industry. Within UK and Europe predominantly. So that happens, and we can learn from this lesson. Now, if we put on a blockchain this organization, responsibilities, what's going to happen in the future, and lock in through the smart contracts our relationships and responsibilities, also to have something which is probably, I'm not going to say we're going to do it, but say, for example, everybody start charging and we decided, okay, fine, in defiance, we're going to create our own specification system. We're creating the system and we promise that forever in perpetuity, the system will be owned by nobody. And the way how it can be owned by nobody, it calls decentralized autonomous organizations, which is automatically managed by the blockchain and smart contract technologies. And that means that we are obliged. There is a structure. We just can't make changes such as MBS or Omniclass doing right now. And it is a very complex, so it's better if I prepare for the presentation and show to you step by step and let you ask the questions.
Yeah. Okay. Nick.
First of all, I hope the outcome going 5-10 years into the future is that we still have Uniclass available to us. And to that end, I have put in an information request into Innovate UK to ask to see the contract that was signed between the government and NBS, Reba Services as it was. And I've had a short answer, but not a long one, and I'm taking legal advice, which will take time, of course. But I think so if anyone has any any knowledge of whether NBS own Uniclass, I'd be very interested to hear it. I think there's a very big question mark over that claim. NBS tell us that they do, but they wouldn't they? And so anyone who's got any information not based on what NBS claim, I'd be very interested to learn more.
Oh, thank you, Nick. I don't want to derail what we're talking about here, but it was such an important thing. I felt it was I thought it was worth raising. Matt Cunliffe.
Yeah, so in the past on sort of digital construction deliveries, we've kind of had it in the bet that actually we provide NRM and Uniclass. So definitely different field, category field, and a code field for both. But basically, you add them both. Now, I don't really see the issue in actually providing that because some people have legacy systems that work one way, and obviously NRM3 has just come out with 2026. So people are going to have to shift across. So what is the problem of having both on them? Because obviously mapping that across to whatever data goes through to the CAFFM later, fine. I mean, yes, it is a little bit more legwork for that digital information handover, but all we need there is just a nice mapping that goes this to that.
Well, yeah, the problem is at the moment, what's happening in America is that, as I understand it, is that the mere use of the code. So in your example there, Matt, the fact that you've included a Uniclass code in it would mean that it was chargeable, not just by you, but it would be charged to all of the people in the supply chain that used it, which is
obviously
madness.
mental, yeah.
Well,
I say it's madness. I think it's madness. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, in the CSI case, there has been a counterclaim that you can't copyright a classification system at all, on the basis that neither the code nor the descriptions amount to the expression of an idea. They're not substantial enough to be copyrighted. Now, it would be extremely expensive and painful to test that idea. But I think we're in a state of flux at the moment, with, as George said, venture capitalists trying to find out what they can own and monetized quickly, against an industry that needs common resources. And CPIC was the author of Uniclass 1 and 2, and their inheritor, I think, is the Construction Industry Council, which is effectively a trust for most of the industry. So it remains to be seen. Ideas about creating a new classification system and putting in blockchain, or putting it into a trust, or reviving an old classification system and saying we'll go back to CISFB or something. I don't like that idea for lots of reasons, but we just have to be alert, I think, at this stage. And if people know stuff, to speak up.
Absolutely. Let's look at this try and look at this as an industry. Chun.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we've been building, the technology and more importantly, building a library, building systems library with metadata, and are focusing on MBSE, model-based system engineering, and DFMA, design for manufacturing assembly logic. So when you generate, the building will be automated design. We don't use AI, the word AI, we call IA, intelligent automation, combination for automation, building system automation and artificial intelligence. So what I'm trying to say is, this Uniclass stuff, I think personally, is just not, we need to rethink about the industry, really about common sense. You may say it's a populist approach, why not? All this, to deliver a building as a contract, as a client, they just want to know how much it costs and ROI. As a contractor, how do we put these things together and make a profit and walk away? Even there's so many, elements are missing, we'll pass on to the, facility management team to carry on doing what they're doing. So what's the needs? If there's something people charging a couple £100,000 per license per year to manage for the facility management, all this Uniclass, all these people, maintenance, all they need is a light bulb's gone off. What's a light bulb? Who makes that? I think we should simplify the process. We have so many red tapes in this country. Nothing's happening. That's something we need to reconsider. There's a fundamental, the core, the root of the disaster is just so many systems, red tapes. We should abolish them completely. and then we build a library, we're going to give this away for free, obviously, because you see, the building system come from the supplier. If I install this at 5-star, I as a company, we did the design, engineer, tested, certified, and there's a qualified installer did that, and then check, validate that by building control. It's all signed off. Why do we need this unit class? We just need common sense. The right product, install it correctly, sign off. Thank you. Goodbye. Should be as simple as that.
I would say that Chun is an architect, by the way. So
And
I
a
just want
contractor
to
as well. Building contractor, and now we're doing the property development. So yeah.
No, it's all right. I just wanted to make sure that the architects amongst us are aware of that before. Yeah. So that's an interesting perspective, Chun.
Common sense. That's the key. That's all we need to think about. Common sense. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Go on then, Nick.
Just one last comment. There are other countries that manage without a classification system by their own claims, but they are heavily into using the IFC, which, of course, as an ISO standard, is free to use. Worst case scenario is 120 francs, but Building Smart has always published it completely freely and openly. So there are alternative approaches.
Until a private equity company takes them over.
Well, then, but it would still be lodged with ISO. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You see. So.
Okay. I'm going to call a halt to this because
yes,
I think probably I set a hair running that I shouldn't have done, and if I've lost people because of that, please excuse me. But I felt it was important for us to raise. Okay. I'm going to just show something that I've asked. This is an application that we had a quick look at a few weeks ago. It's called CompliMind, and it's been developed for the NHS. It just runs for about 7 or 8 minutes. So what I'm going to try and do, if I may, is just show it to you, because I think this is a really interesting way of using AI. Just got to share my screen. Okay. So this is Carl Magnus.
Find regulatory guidance faster, draft documents to trust standards, and check policies against HDMs and HBNs and other regulations, with every answer traceable to the source. I'll show you what this is based on. We've got a regulatory wiki with all of the important guidelines across various different standards, legislation, law, guidance, MHRA, NICE, as well as the local policies in Southampton that have been implemented. Across those, every document is linked to its own original page, so you can see actually the recent HTML 502 update is represented in here. We're linking that back and also notifying people about changes on the platform. If we go into what the chat assistant can do, we can take an example question on fire, for example. What does HTML 201 say about fire door inspection frequency? That then goes into a lengthy thinking process. So we've really fine-tuned this model to be very specific and very accurate. So it actually, whereas Copilot has about 36% accuracy on such regulatory questions, CompliMind achieves 96% accuracy on these really critical high-risk questions, and always links back to the original source. So we can see the different documents being cited, as well as cited on a sentence and paragraph level. So you can always jump back to the original source, where it then highlights within this document where that has been cited. So that's one of the example questions. Another one might be, what is the minimum distance between medical gas and electrical outlet at bedhead? Again, it goes into searching and then retrieves the correct answer, linking to the correct paragraph. This is actually mentioned across 2 different regulations that have different paragraphs around this, but both essentially saying 200 millimeters is the minimum distance, and that can then be used. You could say, use the above information to draft an email to Carl or to Steve. And then that drafts an email, again, citing all the sources, and we can directly link that to our Outlook, which then opens up an email. I'll drag this down here, where you can see the entire email directly pushed into Outlook. So that's a first use case. If we then look at the writing assistant, which is used across 12 trusts in the NHS that we're working with, Southampton being the 4th trust that we've started piloting this in. The writing assistant really helps on meeting minutes, but also operational reports, where it can use the local trust template. So if we look at the template, Word template that we can embed, this is our own complement template, but we can use that template, upload a file, and if we take a sample transcript, for example, we find one. That uploads that file, reads in the transcript. You could also add agenda, slide deck, anything else that you might need, and supporting documents. But from that information, it then uses our regulatory understanding, any references that are being made, for example, in safety group meetings or other committees, and then starts drafting those meeting minutes based on the transcript provided and all of the information required. So it takes a couple of seconds, but should then give a very structured output that the user can double check, edit, as well as use an AI editor, and then download within the specific trust template. So takes it apart into different sections, speakers, etc., etc. Action items are also linked. Those can be attached to people and dates. And then it is an end-to-end integration. So we can export those directly into different safety group meetings. So if we said this is for the digital group, it then exports all of the actions with links to the original pages within the meeting minutes and transcripts. We can assign it to people in the team, create those actions, and then see, for example, if we create this one, see that within the digital group. So if we jump out of this, and I'll try and find the digital actions here, and then the digital group, we then have different group structures with all the past meeting minutes and all the actions, their status, who's been assigned, due dates, etc. People can then go in, resolve, upload evidence, show resolution notes. So that is one of the ways that we use AI to do an end-to-end process from all those committee meetings with reports that are being presented, actions that are being tracked, and new actions that are being generated. One of the most widely used features as well is our review assistant. So a lot of trusts check their policies on a biannual basis as to whether they are up to date and compliant with the regulations. We have built a feature that not only checks has this been reviewed in the past 2 years, but actually how compliant is it with the HTM or the relevant regulations. So you can upload any kind of document and check that against the regulations or legislation of your choice. It takes a while, so I'll jump into an example of a recent review that I did. For example, this ventilation policy that I've been reviewing from an exemplary trust in Wales. It gives me a good overview of what the compliance is in a bit of a written text, as well as a breakdown of all of the critical, partially met and fully compliant aspects of the document, checked against specific guidelines. So HTML 301 part A and B for ventilation, very relevant, breaks that down into requirements within the derogations, says how that policy does not define those roles of a ventilation safety group, which is absolutely critical, suggests a new section under section 4 in here. So if we go into this responsibility section, that is where the responsibilities of the ventilation safety group, for example, should be implemented, but also gives the user at the end the opportunity to say, actually, that is out of scope for us. We can derogate from this, but then have an audit trail of all the derogations that have been made against the specific guidelines and specific statutory duties. So this is one chance to review against the regulations. And then another way is to review locally. So people can edit certain bits and say, wrong, this should be ventilation systems policy. So whoever the document owner is can then go through all of those. In terms of reporting, we've also built, in collaboration with Liverpool University Hospitals, an assurance dashboard that breaks down estates, facilities, capital projects, strategy, and performance into different dashboards, automatically retrieves data that is being tracked and all the KPIs across different groups. So if we jumped into estates, for example, gives a breakdown of all the different groups and the underlying KPIs. There are assurance rules that can be set within this platform. So if we said, actually, this one is 0, the threshold for entrapment incidents, high assurance would mean no incidents whatsoever. Lower is better. We can define different terms here and then compare that and automatically pull that data or implement reporting cycles where staff can be assigned certain parts of the dashboard. They can also link it to Excel spreadsheets where we automatically draw that data from. And yeah, that gives you a quick overview.
Okay. There's another one that is giving me that I don't want to overdo it, but there's one where it's also checking using photographs to check the condition, which is apparently going very well. So does that interest anybody? Would you like more information on that? I'm not selling CompliMind, by the way. I just think it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
That looks really good, George.
Yeah. So if you'd like some information on that, then just put CompliMind in the chat, and we'll get Carl to get in touch. Well, in fact, no. Probably what we'll do is run a special workshop on it. I think that probably makes a bit more sense. Tim, could I ask you to just give us an update on where you are with things, please?
By all means. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So I think we mentioned in a previous meeting, or in several meetings, that we did this review of a health and safety file from of a project for UCL. So what UCL have is about 200 buildings, and they're constantly doing projects. And there's a guy who's responsible for then managing the O&M, the information, the health and safety file information, comes to him in a specific format that is that's pretty tight. They've been doing it since 2017. And so we did the review using a variety of tools, and then I decided to do it again, but this time see whether we could get it all down into one single process. And for this, I was using Anthropic's Claude to do it, but using the desktop co-work application to do it. And this is what it was able to do. It was able to split the O&M the health and safety file back down into its parts, which made it easier to understand and say, oh, I can now just send that drawing to somebody, etc. But this is the key thing. Was it fit for, because the last part of the process was, is this document fit for purpose? Based on a series of criteria, and because we already knew what the answers were, we knew what we needed to get it out. But it generated, of its own volition, this particular spreadsheet with a series of results as to why it was passing or failing or querying things, action items that needed to be looked at. So that I'm pretty pleased with, because it was a process that we went through. Now, the other thing that we've been doing is looking at using...
Sorry, Tim, could you just go back to that for a minute? Because I just want to make a point. And I should say that Patrick, who contributed this as an example, is on the... I think you're on the call at the moment, aren't you, Patrick? Hopefully.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
We haven't sent this to you yet.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, so we're very grateful that Patrick's shared this, because the fact is that in my experience, and this is a shocking thing, in my experience of what we've been going through, nobody's getting their O&Ms right. Yeah. Now,
or the health and safety file, George.
Yeah, sorry.
Which is a statutory document along with the building logbook.
Yeah.
I think I think those are just the two statutory ones. I think the building manual isn't necessarily statutory. The
No,
building logbook definitely is.
Yes.
So
now, the point about this is that unless we can, as an industry, unless we can easily check the information that's being handed over is fit for purpose, we're going to carry on just getting poor quality information. And it's become very clear that this is really important, because all of the work that we've done in terms of creating BIM standards and creating BIM models, a lot of the information that's needed for asset management never goes in the BIM models. It's being delivered in O&Ms. And if it's not being delivered in a way that we can actually use it, then if it's not being delivered in a way that we can use it, and also stuff's missing, then we're nowhere. So that's why I think Patrick has been kind enough to let us use this as an example, because they have probably, in our experience, I think Tim said this, it's the most impressive process that we've come across in terms of the methodology that you're following, because I think, Patrick, you've got the same information going back for hundreds of projects, haven't you?
Yes, we do. Yep. I'll take that plaudit, thank you. On behalf of the on part of the unit on behalf of the university.
Yeah. Well, the great news is that fingers crossed, touch wood, and all that sort of stuff, is that because we've now incorporated that into a skill, we should be able to run it on any of your health and safety files that are structured in the same way. So the next one you send us will be the sort of the litmus test to see whether that works.
The other thing I would say, George. Yeah, the other thing I would say is that the issues that have been found, the reason we've done this work manually, not on this particular project, but we've done it on another project where we had experts. Paul Oakley led it, but we had 2 or 3 experts in different disciplines who, in a very meticulous and methodical way, went through and checked every work package and identified snags and defects in them. And we've then used that to produce the initial report that basically is the dashboard to say which of the O&M packages were incomplete. And in that particular case, they all were bad. Now, because we knew what the answer was, Tim then trained the prompts to be able to come up with the same answers.
Right.
Yeah, and the prompt also includes that dissection of the document back into its parts. It's like unbaking a cake.
Yes.
And that just makes it a lot easier. You say, oh, I've got a folder now called architect's drawings or electrical services drawings or product. So we broke the product information out as well. And also sometimes where products, I said, well, make sure that it is a product information, and some of them weren't product information, so they were certificates. So and you need to know this sort of stuff. So you then say, all right, well, let's make sure that we're checking that and flag up anything that says it's a product information but isn't. And those are when you start to go deeper. And you just say, I'm being you feel as though you're being gaslighted, to be honest, when you look at deep it. But Pierre's got his hand up, George.
Yeah, sure. Pierre.
Okay, Patrick, well done. That's very nice. The main part I see as a benefit here is getting the preemptive part for all future projects. In other words, we're finding all these problems, and what we should be putting forward and developing from this tool, Tim, would be the idea that you go and be aware, and there's the list of things that you need to make sure are being done on design side earliest on, and as you go through. And that really is the real power, is getting more predictive, more preemptive. But yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Well, I totally agree with that, because I've been saying to George, we've got to get to the coalface. We've got to get to the people who are at the coalface, because unless you actually sort that out, you're always going to be post-fixing it. And that is just, and people say, because all along it, at that time, it's like, I remember sitting in meetings where people said, oh, it'll be in the model. Oh, I'm saying it won't be in the model at all. Stop kidding yourselves. And and then when they say, oh, it's not in the model, but it's their job to do it, it's not my job to do it, they're absolutely quite right. So what's going wrong at the coalface is, well, these guys are actually, these subcontractors, they're good at building things. They're good at buying things and putting things together. They're rubbish at actually documenting it all, because they don't see the value of it. So but if we can start to introduce AI tools and show how to be used for themselves without, so that they can check it and build it and do all those sort of things, we're liberating information at the beginning of the pipeline rather than trying to fix it at the, basically we get it at the end. So can we move on to the next bit, George? Because this is the one I'm really excited about.
Yeah, Jonathan's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry,
Jonathan.
Yeah, I was just wondering where you got the document types in terms of whether it's not the right document type. Have we got something being built in terms of basically like a template or checklist of what the document should be? It's like when you've got drawing register, you've got a query about whether it is a drawing register. But
yeah, you're right. Right. Okay. So some of the things that we've been doing is using AI to check to read the document, to read the panel on the title panel to get back a drawing, the drawing information. But you can also say it's actually a drawing, So although it's, because sometimes you'll get a PDF file that contains a specification and a drawing, so those need to be separated out. As to whatever that is, whether it's a schedule or a specification, and then the drawing itself, they need to be the component parts. And you're quite right. Yeah, how do you classify it? And that's one of the things I asked it to do. To say, well, if it's a certificate, put it in a folder called certificates, and if it's a drawing, do this. So, but we're sort of on a very steep learning curve with this, knowing what we want to be able to get to.
I was just thinking it would be great if you kind of had probably even at the start of like a checklist for what you would expect from the types of documents, which we've all seen lots of. It would be even fantastic if it was just a template which everybody else used, but that's probably too much of an easy task. But even just a checklist going, this is what we would expect on a drawing register, and then the AI could check whether that is, and then go, right, well, it's ticked all my boxes, which label it as a drawing register.
Yeah, that is what we did with the O&M checker. We said if there's a list of files there in a table, pull it out, and then let's look at the references and see whether we've actually got a document that actually matches that reference. And the other thing is training it to say, this is what I expect to see, and if it's not there, then flag it as a fail. And it's marking homework, isn't it? Really.
But
Tim, we're trying to change it, make sure that it's not too abstract, that it's not too subjective, and it's more objective.
So, could I just say, Jonathan, would you be willing to put aside an hour with some other people that could look at that particular suggestion that you've just made? Because I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, no worries. Because I've always tried at different places, wanting to really template and have those as the places, and to have it checking and going there and having this helping would be a great place. Okay,
so if anybody else is interested in contributing to what Jonathan's just said there, would you put, well, we'll use your term, Jonathan, templates, for that. So if anybody's interested in maybe joining a discussion on that, templates to actually define what is required, then just put that in the chat, templates.
Okay.
Tim, right, carry on, please.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so the bit that I'm really excited about is connecting information together. Now, there's a thing called command line interface tools that all of the AI companies have. So OpenAI's is called Codex, Gemini's called Gemini, so that's from Google. Anthropic's is called Claude, and then you've got Claude CLI, and then you've got Claude Desktop as well. Now, the CLIs, so this one you don't need a paid subscription, you just need a Google account to run Gemini, and obviously they want you to use it, and they're going to start restricting it, so it's free at the moment. And what I've done is I've connected it to two different MCPs. So an MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and basically it is a server that just tells the AI which tools. So these are basically API tools that say, with these arguments, you can go and query this and you will get back this data. So the tool is effectively an interface onto somebody's APIs. And there are two API, so there are two MCP servers. So whenever I mention that, that's what it's doing. Is that one is for Home Assistant. So I have Home Assistant running on a Raspberry Pi upstairs in one of the rooms, and then I also have on our own PIM, we have I have my house, and it's there, and there's a Kobe API sat on top of that. So I've created an MCP that just is able to discover all those and do that. So this is what it looks like. It's you can see why CLIs are not very nice to think. It's sort of like going back to the 80s, but that's the JSON return that comes back. But eventually it did what I wanted it to do. I said, don't bother showing that. And this was just where I was querying the temperatures in each room on a particular floor, but it needed to actually connect between the codes that I've used in my PIM in my house and the codes that and the sensors and which areas they lived in. Okay, now I'm going to show you then. This is Claude Desktop. So Claude Desktop has a thing called Co-work on it, and in Co-work you can get it to sort out a whole series of stuff. But again, same MCP servers are running in here, and then you just ask it. It's a more a chat interface than the other one. So this is where we started. This is when I was testing it last night. Is to make sure that it could actually read it. And it was very complimentary when it got down. It said, "You've got quite a comprehensive setup," and. The only light on in the house was in the master bedroom because I was still down here at 12 o'clock trying to sort this out. Now, this is the interesting bit I want to get to is when the AI, I asked the AI to actually map the rooms together. And right, I've gone past it somewhere so that in the future, well, that's a conversation with Paul. I'll show you that in a second. Right, what are the aliases? Right, so this is where it said here. I hope you can all see this. That we started off the conversation here. That which is just above here, which is can we map the rooms in Home Assistant to the facility? So my facility code is called SW23. And so it listed out those. It said, I don't know how to do these. So I told it what they were. So it was able to say, right, well, this is what it could be. And it says, we can actually update that by giving each of the areas in Home Assistant an alias, which is the room code. And it also put it in the description as well. But I said, what are those? So it explained what that was. And then we let it rip. And then once it done, I was then going, oh, this is quite impressive. And then when I was talking to one of my colleagues this morning, I was showing him this, and I said I said the same thing. What's the temperature on the first floor? And then I said, oh, can we see that as a graph? Which it then put it into. It's going to just run this up. Because this was another discussion, which is displaying and providing information back to colleagues. So what I want to do is I want to say, oh, well, I just want to send this result over to my colleague here. And this is where it got quite funny because the first attempt it did to actually send the email, it didn't put the attachment in, which was quite amusing. The second one, it did. And it's made a quite neat job of it, really. And I think, so when we're talking about, because one of the things that we have as a company is that people are going, oh, well, we need to have a report writer that does this or does this. And I'm thinking, well, anybody could just write a report now. And they can say, I want it formatted like this, or I want to embed it like this, or I want to combine this service over here with this service over here, get it all mapped and everything. And then so I can just span across these things. Now, there's obviously going to be a limit. Don't get too excited. This is not, there is a limit to how many tool discoveries you can actually have. And I think I think the systems at the moment, they've got a limit of about 16,000 characters in the whole setup. So, but it's exciting at the moment because effectively I've done the experiment. Yes, you can use the AI to write data, do all the what we call CRUD, which is create, update, read, and all of those things are actually there. And some of and because we're using Kobe, it's a very standard stuff. And now what we're going to do is do one where we just say, oh, I've got a new product. I've just installed a new oven, or I've installed a new pump, or whatever. And the AI says, okay, give me the information about it, and I'll create the entries, get your approval, and we'll update the system. Because it's got to be that easy. Because to do it using the interfaces on a lot of systems, quite crude. And what happens is that everybody dumbs down the amount of information they give. And then 2 years later, when somebody wants it all, it's not there. They've just got a description, new oven. And you just go, what's that then? So that's where we're at with it, really.
Brilliant, Tim. Thanks. So that's building on what we showed 2 weeks ago. Okay. So if you want to see what we showed 2 weeks ago, you just got to go and see the video from 2 weeks ago. And we'll be doing another one in 2 weeks' time. I'm going to now open it up and maybe pick on a few people to see how we can do something with that. Tom.
Yes, hi all. It's a question for Patrick, really, just from the previous slide. Just from your perspective, Patrick, going through this sort of process of checking your information, I'm just intrigued to see your thoughts, really, of what you found, sort of obviously checking the data and what's come back.
In terms of checking data, it obviously reveals that there's items that can easily slip through the list, because when contractors and principal designers put these together and review them, they may put titles in, may say, there was an example regarding technical data sheets, let's say for paint, for instance. They may describe it as MD, the manufacturer's data sheet, manufacturer's safety data sheet, but they actually put in technical data sheets, which I'm sure most of you know the difference. But obviously the requirement is to have the safety data sheet, but they may put the title in there, but the contents within that particular section are actually just technical. So you may think that you've got the right information there, but you literally have to drill down into every page. And with that particular search function, the ability with the software to pull this information out, it saves you having to go through the tedious method of going through all the documents. Because I mean, a lot of our O&M and health and safety files are over thousands of pages long. I'm not saying I go through every single page, but it is quite a tedious process, and this will actually alleviate a lot of that, because it becomes quite tedious having to replicate. And going back to what Pierre said, in terms of the lessons, we do have a lessons learned process in UCL with regards to the projects themselves, but not with the O&Ms, because it sits with me. And what I do is I just say, well, the lesson that we learned from the O&Ms doesn't really get promulgated and fed back into the stage gates, i.e. into stage gate 2 and 3, to say, well, we've learned these lessons, you need to incorporate these lessons in new projects going forward. And we haven't done that with the health and safety files, because there's so many, and I'm essentially a one-man band, and as soon as they come in, I just try and get them off my desk and out the door. So unfortunately, I've not been able to develop a lessons learned. But taking up Pierre's point, I think it's a very good point that I need to share the lessons that I've learned, i.e. for the example I've given with the technical data sheets and the manufacturer's safety data sheets, they need to be aligned as to what they're supposed to be, and not what they think they should be. Pierre.
we've sorry, hang on a second, Pierre. So I think the key thing here is that there's a lot of people trying to do a really good job, but we're failing because of some of the connections. And I think that we need to pull together to make the improvements that are needed. We've just also done one, which I might get Tim just to show you in a few minutes after we've heard from Pierre, for a healthcare centre or for a learning centre in healthcare. So, and that's been really quite illuminating, because a lot of the O&M information was delivered in zip files and zip files and zip files. Yeah, which actually becomes it's questionable as to whether anybody's checking them, because they're still in zip files. Yeah.
George, I think standardize. That's the most important part. I do think that the templates that we're talking about earlier, the idea that we've got the template, what's more important is the data and the structure that goes into it. So, Patrick, the wording, is it a technical document? If we get those parts right and those get cascaded out all the time, then people refer to the same document. Its purpose and its intent is then clear, it's fixed. And that means we get a far more consistent delivery. And that's what we're really looking for, is that it's on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. And that makes it so much easier and better to be able to retrieve and read at any point. Thank you.
Yeah,
sorry. So go ahead.
Carry on, Patrick.
No, all I'm saying is that we do have a standard format for UCL health and safety and O&M documentation, because for consistency, because we don't want the contractors to provide us with their information, because operationally, I've come from an operational background. If you know that in volume 4, for instance, that's where the electrical information will be, and any O&M that you will come across at UCL, that section will have the electrical information. It has the drawings, it'll have the schedules, it'll have the certificates, etc. But if you get something from a contractor, they'll produce whatever, and people will operationally, if their backs against the wall, they need to find a drawing, a schematic to how to turn off water because if there's a flood, they have to scan through this because I don't know where this is. But so we have a uniform format. As you're quite right, it's a detail that we haven't developed. We've developed the format. This information needs to be in these particular volumes, and we need to see these. We've got headers, but what I'm trying to do is to put essentially aids to help people. This is what I want in these particular sections. What have you done in this room? What have you put in there? Where? So it's my job to actually refine our format and make it more easier for contractors to deliver what we're expecting, because I keep going, I need to do this. Well, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And I think, well, I'm expecting them to know this, but they may not know. So a standard format would help that with the essentially the weasel words that help them get through the document.
Absolutely. I think the purpose, my view, the purpose of this group is to let people understand what good looks like. Yeah, because at the moment, I don't think people do know what good looks like. They are doing things in isolation, in silos. It may be that there's a information requirements that they're satisfying, but actually they've not thought through how is anybody going to use what I'm providing. And a good example of that is fire stopping, right? So we're the one that Tim is just hopefully going to show for a few minutes. The locations of fire stopping, I think it said it's in the building. Yeah. Now, there's another drawing. There's a drawing with some items on it. But how is that going to be of any use to anybody that's doing an inspection? It means that you've got to open up the drawing. You've got to look at this. It's only saying that it's in the building, or it's internal or external. It's crazy. Victoria.
I love this conversation because I used to work on the side of the client, and then I happens to work on the side of the architect, and I happens to work finally on the construction side. And what Patrick just said, it's so spot on. The contractor has zero idea how the operational manual needs to be seen from the perspective of the operator. And I will show you what I done to communicate, and I hope it will be of any use to you, to communicate to a supply chain. This is a very complex project, complex supply chain. Sorry, not this file. And that will be, sorry, I thought I can prepare it, but it's too many of them open now. Sorry, not this one. Ouch. Here we go. So what we did, and this is a visual diagram in which I kind of copy paste into the reports later, Power BI reports. So I use Power BI, and I used to use it for, I think, Viewpoint for project. We put the metadata on all the documents, which is supposed to go into the safety file. We call it building operational manual. In Ireland, we call it safety file. So we spend a lot of time to talk to supply chain, how they produce the information. Then we talk to the client how they're going to see the information. And then, because it was a digital twin and all sorts of things, we talk to the supplier of digital twin platform, how they're going to take all the mapping from Viewpoint into the metadata mapping into the digital twin platform. So visually I presented like that, but the metadata was actually living inside the platform. And then again, I would go through what was submitted. Say this, we're talking about the electrical. We had a list of all the documentation which needs to be submitted. I'm showing to them. This is obviously today, video showing today, but it was not. The handover was about 2 years ago. So, and then we mapped every individual asset tag in the model on the documents, and we was tracing when the documents was delivered, who was reporting, who was reviewing, and it was a very, very complex process, but we got there by the end. So at the practical completion date, we had 96% operational manual completed, checked, signed off by all the participants. But it took 8 months before the handover to make this process as a part of the kind of not a design team review, it was a separate, the operational manual review. We didn't call it safety file and operational manual review. We just kind of blankly did moved from the simple BIM coordination from pre-installation for M&E, then move for package review in BIM. Yes?
Victoria, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I think that's been very helpful, and I know the diligence. I mean, I've known Victoria for some time, and the diligence that you put into these things. So let's pick up on that. Tim, are you able to share something for a few minutes?
Sorry, yeah, you mentioned something, and then I thought, oh, he means this, and then you mentioned about a file. Anyway, this is the Midland Metropolitan Hospital Learning Centre. So we ran the standard thing. Tell me what's in the document set, and then and obviously then we got a content, so we then know how deep it goes down and all that sort of stuff. So that was that bit. Then right, so this here. We had to download all the data from somewhere, which it didn't really have a very easy to use. It's not that easy to use interface. It would not necessarily. It wouldn't download things that would then keep their folder structure or whatever. It basically put everything into one area. But what I did manage to do is get it to read the interface and get the folder structure with all the relevant information in it as a sort of JSON file. So it created that for me, which was then made it easy to then replicate their folder structure, which I'm going to do here, which is this. So all of this was generated by the AI based upon that. Then we get to here. Then we get to, this was the fun bit. Okay, on these zip files. Because George was using their AI on that application, and I said, I can't find these drawing references. And I said, I know why that is, because they're all in zip files. and if we remember, I don't know, very quick, there are about 70. I think there's 75 zip files, and I just got the AI to actually just unzip them all, because I wasn't going to do it, and so that was nice. And then in order to run our O&M checker, I got it to actually tell me what the work packages are, who the companies were, because what I wanted to do was end up with this is our configuration file for running the O&M checker. What's the work package code, the work package description? Is it a work package? Who's the contractor? What's the contractor codes? They didn't have any contractor code, so I got it to make them up. So just because that's the way our system was working, and it's more COBie-esque because it's an organizational code then. Where's the directory, and find the files that are O&M. So it did that, so I could then run the process. It ran it, and then it produced the report with the defects report as well. So pretty standard stuff. What it also did was create me the folder structure for all the work packages and put inside each work package the document it was going to be using, and then this was the result that came back from the AI, and this was the result, document it then generated as a separate process. So that it's just the way that I developed it. But I was well impressed with myself.
So what we're doing here, I can almost hear Pierre screaming that it shouldn't be necessary to do this unpicking.
No, it shouldn't.
But the fact is that it is at the moment, and therefore what we've done is developed a way of unpicking, reverse engineering, and turning it back into the form that it really should have been. Because one of the big problems is that, you know, in Patrick's case, where if you've got a 1,500-page PDF file that's the O&M, that's one way of looking at it. But how do you keep it up to date?
Yeah. So in Patrick's case, there's Torrington. It broke it down. Those are the volumes. So if we just go to electrical, and now we've got it broken down into the different directories of the information. So warranties, there's one there. Products, we've now got a list of all the products, and then what it did was just make sure that I kept the source it was breaking down from. So it's like you've got this. Oh, it's come from here, and it's brilliant. It's just amazing.
We can map this. In our particular case, we can map these to a product library. So the information that's being collected on this can be mapped back to the manufacturer's product data in a machine readable form, which then means that the next O&M that's being produced, you don't need to have people manually put information in. So I think that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, and I think, so we're getting to the point where so the vision is for how it's constructed at the coalface is that the contractor basically has a folder with a whole series of information in it, and the AI organizes it and then creates the O&M. And then because some of these O&Ms that we looked at for one project, one of them had 6 bullet points was the scope of works. Nothing about standards, done to such a standard, or whereabouts, a brief narrative of where they were going to be working and doing this stuff in the building or whatever. And you just thought, they just don't know how to do a scope of works.
So running out of time, Tim.
Take it from the contract, but there you go.
So if anybody's interested in that, what Tim's just been going there, we're going to do a dedicated session on O&Ms. So if you're interested in O&Ms, then just put O&Ms in the chat and we'll invite you to that workshop. What we're really looking for is people that understand what they want out of an O&M, and also others that know how to create them, so that we can create this level of automation. And I think we've got a fantastic group in here now. So if you're interested in that, then let us know. Good. Okay. I think we're up against the clock. I hope you found this useful. Tell your friends and come along next time, and we some of that stuff, Patrick, you've not seen yet. So perhaps we set up
Caught
another
me there.
session. Yeah, sorry. It's good though, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, just wonder how much I've got to pay next time.
Cool. Okay, good, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.